Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. Mark Hansen stared down at the half-empty glass of whiskey, his rough fingers rubbing the edge. The bar was shadowy, making his tired face look even older than 32. He'd built Hansen Construction from nothing into a well-known company in town. His life should have been perfect with Sarah, his wife of 7 years, beside him. Another one, Mark? The bartender, Gus, asked, sliding closer. Yeah, make it a double. Mark checked his watch. 9:47 p.m. Sarah had said she was working late again. Third time this week. His phone buzzed. A text from his foreman and only real friend, Ben. Saw Sarah at the Grand with some fancy guy. Didn't look like work. Mark's jaw tightened. The Grand was a top-class restaurant downtown, not the kind of place for a casual business meeting. He'd felt something was off for months. The late nights, the new perfume, the way she'd turn her phone away when he walked in. Cancel that drink, Mark said, throwing cash on the counter. I gotta go. Rain smacked his truck's windshield as he drove to the Grand. He parked across the street, engine running. 20 minutes later, they came out. Sarah wore a dress he'd never seen, laughing as she touched the arm of a tall, smooth man with graying hair. Dr. Robert Hayes, the well-known therapist whose office Mark's company had renovated last year. Mark watched as Hayes opened the passenger door of his BMW. Before Sarah got in, Hayes pulled her into a kiss that left no doubt what was happening. Mark's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, but he didn't move. Not yet. He needed more than just a glimpse in the rain. The next morning, Mark kept his usual routine. Sarah had come home late, whispering some excuse about a work problem as she slipped into bed. He said nothing, kissing her forehead before heading to the job site. You look like hell, Ben said, handing him coffee. Need you to cover for me today. Tell the guys I'm meeting with the bank. Mark drove to the electronics store, buying a small recorder and wireless cameras. That evening, he hid them carefully around their house. In his workshop, while Sarah showered, he cleverly made a false bottom in her dresser drawer. Over the next week, Mark gathered proof. Phone calls when she thought he wasn't home, texts he saw when she stepped away from her phone, conversations recorded in their living room when Hayes visited while Mark was supposedly out of town. Their words cut deep. We need to get rid of him, Hayes had said. You deserve better than some blue-collar guy who can't even talk about books. Mark isn't fancy, but he's good to me, Sarah replied. Good enough to keep paying for this lifestyle while we have fun. Their laughter echoed in Mark's workshop as he listened silently, sanding wooden coasters for a housewarming gift he'd promised their neighbors. That night, Sarah suggested a weekend trip to Seattle. You've been working so hard. The Hunter Creek job is done. Let's celebrate. Mark agreed, smiling as he poured her more wine. His eyes showed nothing as he scrolled through his phone, reading another message from Hayes to Sarah. Train tickets booked. Once he's out cold, we'll leave him at the station. It'll be hilarious. The Seattle-bound train hummed along the tracks. Mark nursed his third whiskey, watching the Oregon countryside blur by. Sarah sat beside him, her hand occasionally squeezing his leg. Across from them, Robert Hayes pretended to read papers, having joined them at the last minute due to what Sarah called a lucky coincidence. Drink up, Mark, Sarah encouraged, her green eyes sparkling. You've earned this break. 3 seats ahead, Mark noticed a young woman glancing back at them now and then. Something about her seemed familiar, but the alcohol was clouding his mind. By the time they reached the Washington border, Mark's speech was slurred. He rarely drank much, but the extra sleeping pills Sarah had slipped into his first drink explained his strange state. Let's get some air at the next stop, Hayes suggested. Portland Union Station has a beautiful waiting area. Mark tried to focus. That's backward. We passed Portland hours ago. Sarah laughed. Honey, we're not even an hour out. You dozed off. Something wasn't right. But Mark couldn't fight the darkness creeping into his vision. The last thing he remembered was Sarah and Hayes helping him onto a bench at what they said was just a quick stop. When Mark woke, the station was almost empty. His wallet was still there, but his phone was gone. The big clock above the ticket counter read 2:17 a.m. He stumbled to the information desk, where a night worker barely looked up from her magazine. Last train to Seattle left at 11:40. First morning train is at 6:15, she said flatly. My wife, Mark muttered. Dark hair, green dress, and a man, graying hair. Couple fitting that description boarded the late Seattle train, she replied. Man said his drunk brother would be looking for them. Said to tell you, good luck finding your way home, buddy. They seemed to think it was funny. Mark steadied himself against the counter, clarity cutting through his drugged haze. He wasn't in Portland. The station signs read, Centerville, Washington, a small town halfway between Portland and Seattle. He stumbled outside into the rain, laughing bitterly. The ultimate joke. Abandoned the simple husband in a strange town with no phone. They'd be back in Portland by morning, in their bed, while he struggled to find his way home, arriving messy and humiliated. The young woman from the train approached him under the station awning. "They drugged you," she said plainly. "Who are you?" "Anna Lee. I work for Westlake Insurance. We've been looking into Dr. Hayes for insurance fraud. Your wife became someone we were interested in 3 months ago." Mark stared at her. "You were following us? I didn't expect them to dump you here." She handed him a business card. "Call when you're sober. We should talk." Mark pocketed the card without looking at it. He walked to the 24-hour diner across from the station, ordering coffee. By dawn, as he watched the first commuters arrive, a plan was forming in his mind. He borrowed the diner phone, calling Ben. "I need a favor. Tell Sarah I'm staying longer. Some business came up. She called looking for you already. Said you wandered off drunk." "Perfect. Keep that story going. I'll explain later." Mark withdrew cash from an ATM with his backup card, the one linked to his private account Sarah knew nothing about. He bought a cheap phone, then checked into a motel under a fake name. In his dingy room, he made 2 calls. One to his lawyer asking for urgent paperwork, and another to Anna Lee. "I'm not interested in helping with your fraud case," he told her. "But I need information, and I'm willing to pay for it." 3 days later, Maxwell Hansen legally ceased to exist. Using contacts from his construction days, he got a new identity, Jake Reed. He sold his half of Hansen Construction to Ben for a small amount, with payments going to an offshore account. The motel room became his war room. Anna provided photos of Sarah and Robert's affair going back 18 months, along with details of their conversations. "They've been planning to push you out for months," Anna explained. "Hayes has gambling debts. Your company's success made you a target." When Sarah reported Mark missing, Anna made sure the police investigation stalled, a favor she called in from a detective friend who owed her. Meanwhile, Mark changed his appearance, growing a beard and darkening his blonde hair. Before disappearing completely, Mark made his final move. He emptied their joint accounts, transferring the money to untraceable Bitcoin. Their house, solely in his name, was sold to a shell company he'd set up. By the time Sarah realized what had happened, the house would belong to strangers with no link back to Mark Hansen. "You're being thorough," Anna noted, watching him organize his documents. "They wanted to play a joke," Mark replied coldly. "Let's see how hard they laugh when they have nothing." Mark left one clue. A message scratched on their bedroom wall behind the headboard, where it wouldn't be found until the bed was moved. "Who's laughing now?" With a burner phone, Mark called Ben one last time. "Is it done?" "She came home from Seattle hysterical," Ben replied. "Claimed you wandered off drunk. When police found your empty apartment and the transfer papers, she lost it. Hayes tried calming her down, but they're panicking. Your lawyer served the divorce papers this morning. Did you leave the envelope under the floorboards in their bedroom like you asked? The recording device is still running. Good. Destroy this number after we hang up." Before leaving, Mark considered Anna. She'd been professional, even sympathetic. "Start over with me," he offered. She hesitated. "I can't. I have family here." Mark nodded, respecting her decision. "If you ever change your mind, there's an envelope at this address." He handed her a paper with instructions to a safety deposit box containing $250,000 in cash. His thanks for her help. Hours later, Jake Reed boarded a flight to Phoenix, Arizona. His contractor license transferred easily to the new state, and his starting money, though small compared to what he'd left behind, was enough to begin again. Over the next 20 years, Jake Reed Enterprises grew into one of the Southwest's top construction firms. He specialized in high-end developments, earning a reputation for honesty and innovation. Few knew the man behind the company. He avoided photos and public appearances, managing his empire through trusted managers. The pain of betrayal hardened into something like a diamond inside him. Unbreakable, cold, and capable of cutting through anything in his way. He never remarried, never trusted anyone with his real story. The only reminder of his past was a small newspaper clipping framed in his private office. Local therapist files for bankruptcy following malpractice suit. Hayes had fallen apart after Mark's disappearance, taking increasingly risky cases until one went terribly wrong. It was just the beginning of the long game Mark had set in motion before disappearing. Jake Reed surveyed downtown Phoenix from his penthouse office. The city spread out below him like a glowing circuit board in the desert night. At 52, he was imposing. His once blonde hair was now silver and short, his face lined but distinguished. His physique was maintained through strict discipline. "Mr. Reed, your 2 o'clock is here," his assistant, Miranda, said at the door. "Send him in." Jake straightened his custom suit, a small habit from his former life as Mark Hansen. Lawrence King entered, extending his hand. The developer wanted Reed Enterprises to build his ambitious new project, a self-contained community in the foothills north of Phoenix. Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Reed. They say you build fortresses, not just buildings. Jake smiled tightly. I believe in creating things that last, Mr. King. The meeting went smoothly until King mentioned a possible partner. Dr. Robert Hayes specifically recommended your firm. His investment group is backing part of the project. Jake's face remained calm, but his mind raced. Couldn't be a coincidence. After decades of silence, Hayes appearing in his world could only mean one thing. They'd found him. Dr. Hayes has good taste, Jake replied smoothly, though I don't recall working with him before. He's relatively new to Arizona. Moved from Portland about 5 years ago after some trouble, making quite a comeback in medical investment circles. After King left, Jake summoned his head of security, Vince Torres, a former intelligence operative who'd served him faithfully for 15 years. I need information on Dr. Robert Hayes. Everything. Financial records, personal history, current connections. Most importantly, why he's suddenly interested in my company. Problem, boss? Vince raised an eyebrow. Just due diligence, Vince. And Vince, this stays between us. That evening, Jake drove his Aston Martin to his isolated desert property, 30 miles outside Phoenix. The modern house of concrete and glass sat on a hilltop, almost invisible against the landscape. Inside the home's secure room, he opened a safe hidden in the floor, taking out a metal box he hadn't touched in 2 decades. Inside lay the remnants of Mark Hansen. Original birth certificate, photos of his parents, a small wooden box his father had made, and a USB drive with evidence of Sarah and Robert's betrayal. He plugged the drive into a secure computer, reviewing the old recordings and photos. Their voices sounded strange now, like characters from a half-forgotten movie. His secure phone rang. Vince calling. Found something interesting, Vince said. Hayes married your ex-wife 16 years ago. They've been struggling financially. Hayes lost his medical license after a malpractice suit. Tried reinventing himself as a medical investor. They live in Scottsdale now. Jake's grip tightened on the phone. Any children? One daughter, Bianca Hayes, 22 years old. Jake did the math quickly. The timing suggested she could have been conceived shortly after his disappearance. Get me DNA confirmation, Jake ordered. Already working on it. One more thing. They've been asking questions about Jake Reed. Hired a private investigator last month. After hanging up, Jake stared at a photo of Sarah on his screen. Her betrayal had defined his life's second act, fueling his rise from nothing. Now she was back, likely desperate and wanting something from him. The thought brought a cold smile to his face. His security system alerted him to an approaching vehicle. The cameras showed a woman in her 50s, elegant despite obvious signs of aging, standing at his gate. Sarah. After all these years, she'd found him. Jake activated the intercom. This is private property. Mark. Her voice cracked. It's me. Please, we need to talk. Jake's finger hovered over the button that would open the gate. 20 years of carefully built anonymity hung in the balance. With deliberate slowness, he pressed a different button. The security lights shut off, plunging the entrance into darkness. He watched as she stood there for nearly an hour before finally returning to her car. As her taillights disappeared down the desert road, Jake made a decision. It was time to finish what began at that train station. He would let them find him on his terms. The next morning, Jake received Vince's report. DNA tests confirmed Bianca Hayes was not his biological daughter, sparing him one complication. Financial records showed Robert and Sarah were drowning in debt. Multiple mortgages, credit card debt, and failed investments had left them desperate. They've leveraged everything for King's development, Vince explained. If it fails, they're ruined. Jake nodded. A plan forming. Have our team analyze King's proposal. Every detail, every weakness. Planning to tank the deal? No. I'm going to save it. Jake's smile didn't reach his eyes. After I own it completely. For the next week, Jake kept his routine while monitoring Sarah's movements. She returned to his gate twice more. Each time, he watched in silence. Meanwhile, he arranged a meeting with Lawrence King at the construction site. Standing together, overlooking the barren desert, Jake pointed out critical flaws in the development plan. Your water allocation is too low. The geological survey missed unstable ground beneath the eastern section, and your primary investor group is leveraged beyond sustainability. King paled. How do you know about my investors? I make it my business to know everything about my projects, including Dr. Hayes' financial situation. Jake handed him a folder. His investment group is a paper tiger. They'll collapse before groundbreaking. This would destroy me, King whispered. Not necessarily. I'm prepared to buy out their stake at 40 cents on the dollar and provide the additional capital to fix the water and foundation issues. Why would you do this? Jake clapped him on the shoulder. Because I want to build something remarkable here, something that will last generations. The takeover was swift and brutal. By week's end, Jake controlled 67% of the development. King retained operational control, but financial power had shifted decisively. That evening, a text arrived from an unknown number. "We know who you are, Mark. Meeting unavoidable now. The Grand? 8 p.m. Jake forwarded the message to Vince, who responded immediately. Location secure. Hayes made reservation under his name. Wife will accompany. No visible security. At 8:15, Jake entered the restaurant's private dining room. Vince had arranged for security personnel posing as waitstaff. Robert and Sarah rose as he approached, their faces showing 20 years of comfortable living followed by recent stress. "Mark," Sarah whispered, reaching for his hand. Jake sidestepped her touch, sitting at the head of the table. "I go by Jake now. Shall we order?" The waiter poured wine. Jake noted Robert's trembling hands. "You've done well for yourself," Robert attempted. "Quite the empire." "Yes," Jake replied simply. "Unlike your series of failures." Sarah's face hardened. "We had difficulties after you left. After you abandoned me at a train station." "Corrected," Jake said. "Quite the joke." "It was stupid," Robert admitted. "We were young, irresponsible. And now you're old and desperate," Jake finished, sipping his water. "Which brings us to why you sought me out after all these years." Sarah leaned forward. "We've changed, Mark. What happened was unforgivable. But let's dispense with pretense," Jake interrupted. "You need money. Your stake in King's development was your last hope. Now I control it." Robert's face tightened. "You deliberately targeted us." "No, you deliberately entered my world." "I simply responded." Jake placed 3 documents on the table. "Your options. First, a buyout of your remaining interest at market value, approximately $300,000. Second, consulting positions with the project, salaried, but no ownership. Third, I withdraw completely. The project collapses, and your creditors take everything." "You're enjoying this," Sarah accused. "Immensely." Jake stood. "You have until tomorrow to decide." As he turned to leave, Robert called out, "You owe us more than this, Mark, after what you did to us." Jake paused. "What I did? You destroyed our lives, emptied the accounts, sold the house from under us. Sarah was investigated for your disappearance. We lost everything." "Almost everything," Jake corrected. "You had each other. Wasn't that the point of your little train station joke? To have me out of the way." He left them sitting in stunned silence, driving straight to his office. Vince awaited him. "They chose option 4, Vince reported, sliding a tablet across the desk. The screen showed police reports filed by Robert and Sarah before their meeting, alleging threats and harassment from Jake Reed, whom they claimed was actually Mark Hansen, a man with a vendetta against them. Jake laughed. "They still underestimate me." Jake woke the next morning to his phone buzzing relentlessly. The screen showed 49 missed calls. 7 from Sarah, 12 from Robert, and the rest from unknown numbers. News alerts flooded his notifications. Vince called as he scrolled through the messages. "It started," his security chief said. "They've gone public with their story. Local news is running with it. Phoenix billionaire actually missing husband with revenge plot. They're painting themselves as victims." Jake dressed calmly, selecting his most imposing suit. "Activate contingency protocol. Lazarus. Already in motion. Our crisis team is prepared with the evidence packages." When Jake arrived at his office, reporters swarmed the lobby. His legal team flanked him as he strode through the chaos without acknowledging questions. In his conference room, his executives awaited. Jake addressed them directly. 20 years ago, I was Mark Hansen. I was drugged and abandoned by my then-wife and her lover as a joke. Rather than return to that life, I chose to start over. Everything I've built is legitimate. This company will weather this storm." The room remained silent until his CFO spoke. "What do you need from us?" "Business as usual. This is personal, not corporate." As the meeting ended, Jake's phone rang. "Lawrence King. I'm being contacted by reporters," King said. "They're saying you built your empire on stolen money. Do you believe them?" A pause. "No, but perception matters in our business. Give me 48 hours, Lawrence. Things will become clearer." After hanging up, Jake reviewed Vince's latest report. Robert and Sarah had escalated beyond media. They'd filed legal claims against Reed Enterprises, alleging it was built with assets stolen from Mark Hansen's estate. "They're desperate," Vince observed. "The King project was their last chance." "No," Jake corrected. "I'm their last chance. That's why they're pushing so hard. They think they can force a settlement." Jake spent the afternoon in video conferences with his attorneys. By evening, the story had gone national. The billionaire developer who reinvented himself after being abandoned by his cheating wife. Public opinion seemed split. Some saw him as the victim of a cruel joke who'd risen above his past, while others questioned the legality of his actions after his disappearance. As darkness fell, Jake's secure line rang, a number he hadn't seen in 20 years. "Hello, Mark." Anna Lee's voice hadn't changed much. "Anna, I wondered if you'd surface during this circus. I saw the news. Thought you might need that package I've been holding." Jake smiled. Anna had been his insurance policy. The evidence she gathered as an insurance investigator had been preserved and updated over the years. Her testimony could destroy Robert and Sarah's claims of innocence. "I think it's time," he agreed. "Can you be in Phoenix tomorrow?" "I've been in Phoenix for 3 years," she replied, "running the regional office of Westlake Insurance. I've kept tabs on you." The revelation startled him. "Why didn't you contact me? You seem to be doing fine on your own." But this changes things. As night deepened, the calls continued to accumulate on Jake's phone. 49 missed calls became 60, then 75. He ignored them all, focusing instead on preparing his counterattack. In his desert home, Jake opened a safe containing one final piece of evidence he'd never revealed. The original recording devices from his former home, which had captured Sarah and Robert discussing their plan to drug and abandon him, along with their intentions for his money. "They thought the joke was leaving me behind," Jake murmured to the empty room. "But the real joke is what's coming next." Dawn broke over Phoenix with Jake already awake, reviewing documents in his home office. The media frenzy had intensified overnight, with morning shows featuring interviews with friends of Mark Hansen who claimed he'd been unstable before his disappearance. "They're crafting a narrative," Vince observed, bringing coffee. "Making you sound mentally ill before the train station incident." "Of course they are." Jake nodded toward the television. "Look at the friend they're interviewing." The screen showed a heavy-set man identified as Colin Denver, Mark's former colleague. Vince frowned. "Problem. Colin Denver died 12 years ago. That's an actor." Jake's phone lit up with a text from Anna. "Ready when you are." Jake's response was immediate. "Excalibur Protocol. Noon." By mid-morning, Jake had convened his crisis team at Reed Tower. Legal representatives, PR specialists, and security personnel filled the conference room. "At noon today, we release the full evidence package to select media outlets," Jake instructed. Simultaneously, our legal team files countercharges against Sarah and Robert Hayes for defamation, fraud, and conspiracy. His general counsel raised a hand. "The statute of limitations doesn't apply," Jake interrupted, "because they've reopened the matter publicly and made new fraudulent claims. Anna Lee's testimony confirms the original drugging incident, and we have evidence they fabricated witnesses for their current media campaign." As the meeting adjourned, Jake's private elevator opened, admitting Anna Lee. 20 years had treated her well. Her blonde hair now had elegant streaks of gray, but her posture remained ramrod straight, her eyes sharp. "You've become quite the tycoon," she said, embracing him briefly. "And you never did cash those bearer bonds." She smiled. "I considered them a long-term investment." Together, they reviewed the evidence compilation, a devastating collection of documents, recordings, and testimonials that would not only clear Jake's name but expose Robert and Sarah's 2-decade history of deception. "There's a risk in doing this," Anna cautioned. "Once this becomes public, Jake Reed and Mark Hansen will forever be connected." "I'm not hiding anymore," Jake replied. "That part of their power over me ends today." At 11:45, Jake's phone rang. Sarah again. This time he answered. "Mark, please, we need to talk. Things are spinning out of control. That was your choice. You went public because you left us no options. This development was our chance to rebuild." Jake's voice hardened. "Like I had to rebuild after you left me drugged at a train station? It was a stupid prank. We came back for you the next day, but you were gone." "Lies," Jake replied calmly. "Anna Lee has provided sworn testimony that you returned to Portland that night, celebrating your freedom from the unsophisticated husband." Silence stretched between them before Sarah's tone changed. "What do you want, Mark? Money? We'll drop the claims if you reinstate our stake in the development. Turn on Channel 12 in 15 minutes. You'll have my answer then." At precisely noon, Jake stood before cameras at a hastily arranged press conference. His legal team distributed evidence packets to journalists as he approached the microphone. 20 years ago, I was Mark Hansen," he began, "a successful contractor whose wife and her lover drugged him and abandoned him at a train station as a joke. Rather than return to betrayal, I chose to rebuild my life under a new name, legally and transparently, using only seed money from accounts that were solely in my name." He gestured to Anna, who joined him at the podium. "This is Anna Lee, an insurance investigator who witnessed the aftermath of their prank and has maintained records of their actions since." For the next 30 minutes, Jake dismantled Sarah and Robert's claims, presenting evidence of their original plot, their subsequent financial misdeeds, and their recent fabrication of witnesses. "I filed no charges against them until now," Jake concluded. I simply wish to live my life in peace. Their decision to pursue me through false claims has forced this response. As he finished speaking, Vince approached with a tablet. The screen showed Robert and Sarah watching the broadcast from their Scottsdale home, their faces ashen. Phase 2. Vince asked quietly. Jake nodded. Proceed. Across town, federal agents arrived at the Hayes residence with search warrants related to wire fraud and tax evasion charges, stemming from their fabricated investment group and years of financial misrepresentations that Jake's investigators had uncovered. As Jake departed the press conference, Lawrence King called again. I've seen everything, King said. I'm still in if you are. The development proceeds as planned. Confirmed, Jake replied. Without the Hayes involvement. By evening, the media narrative had shifted dramatically. What began as the story of a vengeful ex-husband had transformed into a tale of resilience against betrayal. Financial analysts praised Jake's transparency while questioning how the Hayeses had maintained their lifestyle despite years of documented losses. In his desert home, Jake watched the coverage with Anna. Feel vindicated? She asked. Vindication implies I needed external validation. This was simply correction. Anna studied him. You've been planning this for 20 years, haven't you? Not just protecting yourself, but preparing for when they eventually found you. Jake smiled. The best revenge is built slowly, brick by brick. The days following Jake's press conference brought a cascade of revelations. Federal investigators expanded their probe into Robert and Sarah's finances, uncovering connections to multiple fraudulent investment schemes. Former patients came forward with allegations that Hayes had mishandled their cases, stories that had been suppressed through settlements containing non-disclosure agreements. Jake observed the fallout with detached precision, directing Vince to maintain surveillance but take no further action. The system he'd set in motion would complete what he'd started. They've requested a meeting, Vince reported 3 days later. Through their attorney. Denied, Jake replied without hesitation. All communication through legal channels only. On the 4th day, Bianca Hayes, Robert and Sarah's daughter, appeared at Reed Tower, demanding to see him. Security alerted Jake immediately. What's your assessment? Jake asked Vince after viewing the security footage. She's angry, but composed. 22 years old, graduate student in psychology at ASU. No criminal record. Jake considered it for a moment. Send her up. Bianca Hayes had Sarah's green eyes but none of her softness. She sat across from Jake, her posture rigid with controlled fury. You've destroyed my parents, she began without preamble. Your parents destroyed themselves, Jake corrected. I merely exposed the truth. The truth? She scoffed. You abandoned your wife, stole your joint assets, and disappeared. Then you spent 20 years building an empire while planning revenge. Jake leaned forward. Is that the story they told you? That I abandoned Sarah? I've seen the police reports from when you disappeared. Reports your mother filed after they left me drugged at a train station. Jake activated his display, showing her the evidence Anna had compiled. This is what actually happened. Your mother and father, who was her lover while we were married, thought it would be amusing to drug me and leave me in an unfamiliar city without my phone. I simply chose not to return to people capable of such betrayal. Bianca's face remained impassive as she reviewed the documents, but Jake noted the slight tremor in her hands. Even if this is true, she said finally, your response is disproportionate. They played a cruel prank. You've orchestrated their complete destruction. No, Jake shook his head. I never contacted them after I left. I built a new life, leaving them to theirs. They chose to enter my world, to attempt blackmail through media pressure. Everything that's happening now is the consequence of their choices 20 years ago. And last week. Bianca stood, gathering her composure. They're facing criminal charges. They could go to prison for crimes they actually committed, Jake noted. Not ones I fabricated. Is there nothing I can say that would make you stop this? Jake studied her, innocent of her parents' sins, yet shaped by their deceptions. I won't pursue them further, but I won't intervene in legitimate investigations either. After she left, Anna called. I saw Robert and Sarah's daughter enter your building. Everything okay? She wanted me to call off the dogs, Jake said. I told her I wouldn't pursue additional charges. That's surprisingly restrained. She's not responsible for their actions, Jake replied. Unlike them, I don't punish the innocent. The following morning, Lawrence King arrived with updated development plans. The project, now named Phoenix Ascendant, would proceed with Jake as the majority stakeholder. We've resolved the water rights issues, King explained, spreading blueprints across the conference table. And the foundation reinforcement adds only 12% to construction costs. Jake approved the revisions, signing the final contracts. As King departed, he asked, how does it feel? Winning so completely? Jake considered the question. It feels appropriate. Later that day, As Jake reviewed quarterly projections, Vince entered with news. Nathaniel Hayes had suffered a heart attack and was in intensive care. Sarah had been arrested on related fraud charges after investigators discovered evidence she'd been orchestrating their financial schemes. Do you want to respond? Vince asked. Jake shook his head. No, their chapter in my life is closed. That evening, Jake drove to his desert home, watching the sunset paint the landscape in amber and crimson. His phone rang. Anna thought you might want company tonight, she said when he answered. I'm fine. Didn't ask if you were fine. Asked if you wanted company. Jake smiled despite himself. The gate code is 4721. They sat on his terrace as darkness claimed the desert, sharing a bottle of whiskey. What will you do now? Anna asked. Your secret's out. Mark Hansen and Jake Reed are forever connected. Continue building, Jake replied. That's what I do. Anna studied him in the fading light. You never really moved on, did you? Everything you've built was shaped by what happened at that train station. Jake considered her words. Perhaps, but I built something lasting from that foundation of betrayal. There's a certain symmetry to it. Is it enough? She asked quietly. Jake didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. It will have to be. 1 month after his public revelation, Jake stood at the Phoenix Ascendant groundbreaking ceremony. Photographers captured his silver-haired figure against the desert backdrop as he pressed the ceremonial shovel into the earth. This development represents more than luxury homes and commercial space, he told the assembled journalists and dignitaries. It's about creating something that outlasts us, a community built on solid foundations. The symbolism wasn't lost on those familiar with his story. Lawrence King nodded appreciatively at the double meaning. As construction began, Jake received word that Nathaniel Hayes had survived his heart attack but faced multiple federal charges. Sarah had accepted a plea deal, agreeing to testify against associates in their various financial schemes. They'd lost everything. Their homes seized, assets frozen, reputations destroyed. Vince provided regular updates on their declining situation, but Jake found himself increasingly disinterested. The reckoning he'd anticipated for 20 years had arrived. Yet, it brought neither joy nor peace, merely closure. Anna had become a more frequent presence in his life, their shared history creating a unique understanding between them. One evening, as they reviewed charitable foundation proposals in his office, she broached the subject directly. Have you visited them? Jake looked up from his papers. No. Why would I? Because until you do, they still have power over you. He considered her words carefully. Perhaps you're right. The next day, Jake directed his driver to the federal detention center where Sarah awaited sentencing. Vince had arranged the meeting, ensuring privacy. Sarah appeared haggard, her once vibrant beauty dulled by stress and defeat. She sat across from Jake, separated by a reinforced glass partition. I didn't expect to see you, she said, her voice steady despite everything. I needed to understand something, Jake replied. All these years later, did you ever regret what you did at that train station? Sarah studied him before answering. Yes, not immediately. We thought you'd find your way home, humiliated but unharmed. When you disappeared instead, I felt relief at first, then guilt. But Robert convinced me you'd orchestrated it to punish us. And you believed that? Her eyes met his directly. It was easier than admitting we destroyed something good for a cruel joke. Easier than acknowledging I'd betrayed a good man who loved me. Jake absorbed her words silently. You won, Mark, she continued. You took everything. No, Jake shook his head. You and Robert took everything from yourselves 20 years ago, and again now. I simply refused to be your victim. He stood to leave but paused when she spoke again. Was it worth it? Building your entire life around revenge? Jake considered the question. I didn't build my life around revenge. I built it around never being vulnerable to people like you again. The distinction matters. From the detention center, Jake drove to the Phoenix Ascendant construction site. Workers had begun laying foundations for the first buildings. Lawrence King greeted him, walking him through the progress. We're ahead of schedule, King noted proudly. The modified design actually improved efficiency. Jake nodded, watching excavators carve into the desert floor. I want to make a change to the Central Park area. Add a water feature. Something significant that'll increase costs. It's important, Jake insisted. Something that rises from stone, transforms, and emerges stronger. King studied the blueprint. Jake sketched a phoenix, water, and stone. Symbolic, Jake said. Sometimes symbolism matters. That evening, Vince delivered his final report on the Hayes situation. Nathaniel Hayes had been denied bail and faced 15 to 20 years if convicted on all charges. Sarah's plea deal would likely result in 3 to 5 years. Their remaining assets had been liquidated to cover legal fees. What do you want done with the surveillance? Vince asked. Continue monitoring, Or terminate? Jake considered the question. 20 years of vigilance weighed against the freedom of letting go. Terminate, he decided. It's finished. Later, as Jake watched the sunset from his terrace, Anna joined him, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. I visited Sarah today, he said, accepting the drink. And nothing. They're just people. Flawed, selfish people who made terrible choices. He turned to face her. You were right. I needed to see that for myself. Anna settled beside him, her shoulder brushing his. What happens now, Jake Reed? Jake smiled slightly. Now, I build something new. 6 months later, Phoenix Ascendant's first phase neared completion. At its center stood the promised water feature. A massive sculpture of a phoenix rising from stylized flames, water cascading around its wings. The base contained a simple inscription. From ashes, rebirth. Jake walked the grounds with Anna, reviewing final details before the grand opening. It's remarkable, she said, studying the sculpture. This whole development. It's something to be proud of. Yes, Jake agreed. Something that will outlast the pain that inspired it. As they stood there, Jake's phone chimed with a news alert. Nathaniel Hayes had been sentenced to 18 years for fraud and conspiracy. Sarah had received 4 years with the possibility of parole after 2. Jake read the notification, then silenced his phone and returned it to his pocket without comment. Not interested? Anna asked. Their story isn't mine anymore, Jake replied, taking her hand. I have other foundations to build now. As evening settled over Phoenix Ascendant, lights illuminated the rising phoenix, water gleaming against stone. Jake Reed, once Mark Hansen, stood beside the woman who'd helped him rise from his own ashes, finally free of the past that had defined him for 20 years. The joke played at a distant train station had long since faded. In its place stood a legacy of strength, resilience, and ultimately, release. A testament not to revenge, but to the power of transformation. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.